It's a land that can take your breath away, with towering volcanic pinnacles to make you gasp in awe, stunning canyons to knock the wind right out of you, and encounters with wild creatures that might just leave you waiting to exhale. But here in Wyoming, there are man-made wonders too, from the mysterious circle of an ancient tribe to giant mines carved by the biggest machines in the world. To vast stretches of oil fields that light up the prairie sky, worrying environmentalists, but giving jobs to thousands from across the nation. Aerial Wyoming soars through the lush valleys of the world's first national park, high up into icy peaks, and across a landscape of where the meeting of sky, earth, and water make it hard to know just where you stand. Here, cowboys still ride the range and hold on for dear life just for fun. Just as the people of Wyoming have always hung in there and done what's right when it really matters, condemning a horrifying act of hatred in the 21st century, and celebrating equal rights for women in an age when few others would, revealing the true spirit of one of America's most breathtaking states, a place whose volcanic wonders will always boggle the mind. All this in Wyoming. In the mid-1880s, a group of prospectors came to the unmapped mountains of northwest Wyoming in search of gold. They found something they didn't expect instead, something that left them scratching their heads and remains a mystery to scientists today. A giant rock circle known as the Bighorn Medicine Wheel. Its 28 spokes seem to match the lunar and solar cycles, but there are no clues as to who built it or why. Carbon dating suggests that construction of the ring began as recently as 500 years ago. By then, humans had already been living in Wyoming for over 11,000 years. A Stone Age tribe scientists called the Clovis people were among the first to arrive. They were known to hunt big game. Other groups followed, including the Folsom and the Eden Valley. About 500 years ago, the ancestors of today's Native Americans began sweeping into the region in a competitive search for land and food. The Shoshone came first in the 1600s, moving up from what is now Nevada. 100 years later, in the 1700s, the Arapaho, Crow, Cheyenne, and Lakota Sioux started muscling in on the Shoshone's new territory from the north and east. But in the early 1800s, members of the most aggressive and well-armed tribe yet started fanning out across Wyoming, European Americans. Starting with prospectors like those who discovered the medicine wheel, the most legendary of them all was a mountain man named Jim Bridger. Bridger was the first white man to see Utah's Great Salt Lake, and one of the first to visit what is now Yellowstone National Park. But he earned his fame as one of the greatest guides on the Wyoming frontier. Bridger's adventures began in 1822 when he joined a party of 100 trappers on a trip up the Missouri River and onto the land that's now Wyoming. He and his companions traveled Wyoming's waterways in search of beaver pelts to sell back east. But they and hundreds of other hunters helped nearly wipe the beavers out. And soon Bridger was forced to seek another line of work. In the 1840s, wagon trains were carrying thousands of pioneers west. right across the land that's now Wyoming. In 1843, hoping to cash in on this mass migration, Bridger and his partner, Luis Vasquez, opened a trading post in a beautiful valley of trees, meadows, and streams, including one known as Black's Fork. For a decade, they prospered as their primitive stockade grew into a key stop on the Oregon and Mormon trails. But in 1853, local Mormon settlers accused Bridger of illegally selling liquor and guns to the Indians. When they came to get him, Bridger fled to the mountains for safety. The Mormons seized the post and turned it into a fort during a conflict with the federal government over their practice of polygamy, a conflict known as the Mormon Wars. When the U.S. Army came to drive them out, they burned their fort to the ground and fled. Today, all that remains is this small piece of charred wall. To reassert federal authority in the region, the Army built a fort of its own on the site and named it Fort Bridger. With barracks for up to 350 men, a school, and this elegant residence for the commanding officer. The base remained a center of pioneer life for the next 3 decades. As thousands more poured through Wyoming on the way west to Oregon and California. Near this ridge, known as the Oregon Buttes, they finally passed over the Continental Divide. From here, every river flowed west, and so did the pioneers, riding into the sunset in search of a dream. For many Mormon travelers, their dream was to reach the Great Salt Lake in Utah. But on the way, this rocky formation, known as Church Buttes, knocked more than one devout traveler to their knees. The buttes, steeple like needles and eroded 75-foot sandstone cliffs, reminded them of the houses of worship they had left behind back east. The site caused many of the settlers to stop, drop, and pray. But while most westbound pioneers passed right through Wyoming, some decided to stay and try to make a go of it. In 1897, 27 Mormon families came to this valley to extend their new faith into new lands. They built homes and barns on the valley floor and began to farm. The sandy soil soon proved to be less fertile than they had hoped, but they shouldered on, working for decades to realize their dream of a new utopia in the wilderness. Farmer Thomas Moulton spent 30 years just building this one barn. Today, it still stands as a reminder of the Mormons' struggle to survive here. It's also one of Wyoming's most photographed sites, thanks in part to the fact that the barn's backdrop is one of the most dramatic in the American West. The great, jagged, icy peaks of the Tetons. The Shoshone people, who lived in northwest Wyoming before Europeans arrived, had a deeply spiritual relationship with this land. They lived in the shadows of a string of dramatic peaks that they called the Tiwanaut, which they considered ancient ancestors to be respected and revered. But in the 1700s, when lonely French trappers arrived in present-day Wyoming, they saw something else in these peaks and gave them the name Teton, or Tetons, which was French for breasts, and reserved the name Grand Teton for the highest peak in the range, a surprisingly salacious name that survives to this day. Perhaps because most English speakers have no idea what Tetons actually means. As some of the youngest peaks in the Rocky Mountain Range, they now serve as the centerpiece of Grand Teton National Park. These mountains were created by uplift, when two sections of the Earth's crust collided deep below, pushing the ground upward. Thanks to their youth, the Tetons are relatively untouched by erosion and time, still jagged and steep, unlike many other Rocky Mountain peaks. The Shoshone, Blackfoot, Crow, Nez Perce, and other native peoples came here in spring to hunt, gather plants, and collect minerals during the warm months. When winter came, they'd return to lower, less wintry lands. The tallest peak in the range, Grand Teton, reaches to 13,775 feet above sea level and is still growing at a fast clip, at least in geological terms, up to a foot every 300 or 400 years, as the basin to the east drops away. In 1829, even before the Mormons arrived, a trapper named David Jackson made his camp here, and the area was named Jackson Hole, prospector slang for valley. It stretches along the base of the Tetons for 40 miles. During the Ice Age, a series of glaciers shaped its floor, carving basins for a chain of alpine lakes that mirror the mountains and dazzle the eye. In 1965, hoping to capitalize on these stunning views, a group of skiing investors opened the Jackson Hole Mountain Resort. It's nestled at the edge of the valley in Teton Village. Today, it's one of the most popular winter destinations in the U.S. After riding the aerial trams to the top of the mountain, skiers can hurtle back down on one of the longest vertical drops in the nation, more than 4,000 feet in all. And today, Trapper Jackson will probably have a hard time recognizing much of the valley that bears his name, especially if he paddled down the Snake River, past a stretch of vast luxury homes known as Billionaire's Row. Part-time residents here include a president of the World Bank, a former CEO of Columbia Pictures, a Walmart heiress who's also the richest woman in America, and many other members of the 1% of the 1%. Not to mention John D. Rockefeller IV. The real estate wars here have transformed this once quiet valley into the most expensive ranch land in the U.S., leading some to joke that all the mere millionaires are getting priced right out of the market. But there's one relatively modest house here that stands out among the mega mansions. Perhaps because it was partially hand-built by its owner, actor Harrison Ford, a former carpenter who bought 800 acres here in 1985. In the years since, Ford has committed himself to preserving and protecting his share of this beautiful valley. The people who actually work and live here full-time stake their claim to another corner of Jackson Hole, the town of Jackson. It lies on the southeastern side of the Jackson Hole Valley, near the rushing waters of the Snake River. It was founded and run by working men and by working women. Postmistress Maggie Simpson named Jackson in 1894. Future Mayor Grace Miller laid out the streets 3 years later, setting aside space for an old-fashioned town square, now famous for the elk antler arches over its corner gates, a charming centerpiece to a town that gained fame as the first in America run entirely by women, after Miller and an all-female slate of candidates swept the city elections in 1920. But even if the town's men didn't always feel welcome at City Hall, they were always welcome here, Jackson's $1 Million Cowboy Bar. It was granted Wyoming's first post-prohibition liquor license. Ever since, locals and tourists have been saddling up to the bar with its famous saddle-style bar stools for a drink. In 1953, its owner added a distinctive neon sign that stands over the new Jackson as an enduring symbol of an old way of life in Wyoming. The life of the working cowboy. Men and women who perform difficult and dangerous tasks every day, using skills they get to show off once a year in the little town of Sheridan at the Sheridan Rodeo. Here, bronco busters risk their spines to prove they've got what it takes to tame a horse, or at least hang on for the 8 seconds required by the rodeo's rules. But there's one trick that may be the toughest to pull off: dual calf roping. To make it work, one cowboy has to rope the calf's head, the other the feet, and do it with perfect timing. Thrilling the crowd and proving they've got what it takes to make it in this cowboy state. Here in Wyoming, cows outnumber humans 2 to 1 and put working cowboys to the test every day. The state's herds got their start from cattle abandoned by settlers on their way west. When their offspring flourished, ranching in Wyoming took off. By 1870, there were over 8,000 head of cattle in the territory, and more were flooding in, along with the cowboys to keep them moving. Today, livestock is Wyoming's biggest agricultural commodity. But cowboys aren't the only ones out working on the range. Here in Sheridan County and across the state, farmers grow hay, barley, wheat, and more, giving Wyoming more than 8 times as much agricultural land as most American states. But there's one business in Wyoming that's bigger than ranching and farming combined, much bigger. And it got to number 1 not by reaping enormous profits from what's on the land, but from what's under it. Coal. This fossil fuel got its start millions of years ago, when soggy masses of vegetation were covered by layers of soil. As the soil's weight squeezed the water out, energy-generating carbon was left behind. Carbon in the form of coal. So much coal that it takes some of the largest machines in the world, digging some of the biggest mines in the world, to strip it from the land. To get to the dark veins, huge excavators work 24/7. These machines are called drag lines because their giant shovels are dragged across the mine on thick steel cables to strip away the soil above, known as the overburden. Then it's hauled off and dumped out of the way, allowing the harvesting of the coal itself to begin. Over 100 million tons were extracted here at the North Antelope Rochelle mine in 2012 alone, making this the most productive coal mine in the U.S. And the output here and across Wyoming is on the way up, since coal is one of the world's hottest commodities. There's so much coal in Wyoming, it requires mining equipment so big and so powerful, it boggles the mind. Like this drag line at the Black Thunder coal mine. Its 360-foot boom, 240-ton bucket, and cab the size of an apartment earned it the title Ursa Major, or Big Bear. It cost $50 million and took 3 years just to assemble here on site. The raw power of Ursa Major is astounding. Thanks to its boom, it can swing hundreds of tons of earth hundreds of feet in seconds. Its long dragline cables enable it to scoop up overburden that's 200 feet below the dragline itself. And this one machine is operated by just a single person. Ursa Major's power to tear through the earth gives headaches to environmentalists, but also powers an industry that provides thousands of jobs. Most coal in Wyoming is extracted from the earth in giant surface mines like these. But dig much deeper in this state, and there's even more treasure to be found. Vast oceans of crude oil, thousands of feet underground. It lies below a landscape that's unlike any other in Wyoming. Nearly 35 square miles of land covered by almost nothing but oil wells. This is the Salt Creek Field, one of the longest continuously producing oil fields in the world. One reason the Salt Creek Field can still produce oil today is because companies here are using new technologies to force what remains out of the ground. Crews are busy drilling new wells that use carbon dioxide injection. As the carbon dioxide is pumped into the earth, it forces the oil out. And a controversial side product common to many wells. Natural gas, the oil companies don't want, and merely burn away in flames that dot the landscape. a practice many decry as a waste. Proponents of carbon dioxide injection claim the new technology provides safe and innovative ways to tap a vital natural resource. Foes warn that it could contribute to global warming and poison Wyoming's drinking water. During its big boom, all the oil that flowed out of Salt Creek made its way south to Casper, a city that got its start when Mormon settlers built a ferry crossing over the Platte River in 1847. Thousands of pioneers rode across in the following decades. When the trains arrived, the crossing became a town. The discovery of oil at Salt Creek in the 1890s transformed it into the oil capital of the Rockies. A transformation celebrated here with this recreated wooden derrick, part of a new Black Gold Byway State Park. Today, Casper is Wyoming's second largest city, with a population of over 55,000 residents. And it still has a giant tank farm to hold the oil being forced out of Salt Creek. People in Wyoming have spent more than 100 years and billions of dollars trying to find ways to get energy out of the ground. But there's one place in this state where the power deep below explodes to the surface, all on its own, with terrifying force, in one of the most volatile volcanic hotspots in the world. Sometimes the truth seems too fantastic to be true. In the early 1800s, scouts and trappers started coming back from the mountains of northwestern Wyoming with tales of a land called Yellowstone, a land unlike any they'd ever seen before. A place so fantastic that people who heard the stories were convinced they were fiction. Frontiersman Jim Bridger told of finding a canyon there so deep that a man could shout "good night" into it and be awakened by his echo at dawn. People just accused him of spinning tall tales. A group of prospectors wrote a book about what they'd seen beyond the canyon. Their New York publisher rejected it as fiction. But more and more explorers kept coming back with similar tales. So, Ferdinand V. Hayden, head of the U.S. Geological Survey of the territories, assembled the first federally funded survey team to explore the area and set out to see this strange land for himself. In 1871, Hayden led a 32-man team into this valley. They included a zoologist, a botanist, a mineralogist, and a group of map makers. But the two who would have the biggest impact on the American public were photographer William Henry Jackson and painter Thomas Moran. Hayden and his men knew that Yellowstone was home to volcanic hotspots, but what they didn't know was that they were actually standing in a giant collapsed crater of a supervolcano, and one that had erupted with catastrophic force 640,000 years ago, when 250 cubic miles of heated magma and other material exploded into the air, creating an ash cloud that's been traced from Canada to Mexico to Louisiana. Based on past events, scientists say Yellowstone is overdue for another major eruption, but warn that it's impossible to predict when exactly that will happen. In the meantime, its strange volcanic landscape draws huge crowds to Yellowstone today. In 1871, Hayden and his party had never seen anything like it and were eager to see more. On July 28th, they reached the shores of Yellowstone Lake, America's largest high-elevation lake, and set up their base camp. By then, they were already suspecting that everything they'd heard about this place was actually true. From here, they set out to explore Yellowstone and document its every feature in maps, photographs, paintings, and statistics, starting with Yellowstone Lake itself. They were careful to avoid the fate of Truman Everett, an explorer who spent 37 days lost in Yellowstone in 1870 without a horse or supplies. When a search party finally found Everett stumbling through the wilderness here on the banks of Heart Lake, he was delirious and near death. He weighed just 90 pounds and was so dirty his rescuers mistook him for a wounded bear. Hayden's men fared better as they traced the course of the Yellowstone River through the canyon Jim Bridger had described. They found it to be just about as big as he had promised. Now known as the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone, it winds through a plateau created by lava from the volcano's Big Bang. Modern scientists know the extreme heat of the blast weakened the lava, making it easier for glaciers and water to cut through the colorful stone that gives this region its name. The explorers' stories of the amazing things they discovered here fascinated the American public. But it was the paintings and photographs of Yellowstone's geysers that really blew people away. Yellowstone has half of all the known geysers in the world, around 300 in all. Here, at the Clepsydra Geyser, cold water flows into tight crevices in Yellowstone's molten core and explodes into steam. Clepsydra's been erupting almost continuously since 1959. Its plumes of water can reach up to 40 feet, making it one of Yellowstone's most reliable and photographed sites. But the meeting of water and hot stone here doesn't always bring such explosive results. Nearby, the calm waters of the Excelsior crater seem to invite the unwary for a swim. But don't be fooled. That beautiful blue color means the water is so hot, not even the hardiest bacteria can survive. This same deadly blue lies at the center of what is, without doubt, one of nature's most amazing sights. A place that alone lures thousands of people from around the world to Yellowstone. It's known as the Grand Prismatic Spring. This is the largest hot spring in the U.S. and the third largest in the world. Its blue core may be deadly, but the colorful cooler bands at its edges are evidence that the Grand Prismatic is also home to plenty of life. Each band supports a unique bacteria or algae that creates a color of its own. When visitors on the boardwalk of the Grand Prismatic cross patterns that look like giant flames, they are stepping over descendants of some of the earliest forms of life on Earth. These microbes, called thermophiles or heat lovers, thrive in extreme environments like the waters of Grand Prismatic Spring. There are literally billions of these tiny orange-colored microbes here. So many, they create dramatic flame-like patterns that look like a work of art that was painted by Mother Nature herself. Getting a chance to experience this colorful, steaming cauldron is why many come to Yellowstone in the first place. But there's nothing like seeing it all from the air. In 1872, it was Thomas Moran's paintings of the Grand Prismatic Spring that helped inspire Congress and President Ulysses S. Grant to declare Yellowstone the world's first national park, preserving all its geological wonders for generations to come. It also protects some of the last remains of the great herds of elk that used to wander across the American heartland. So much protection that an elk population explosion once threatened to overwhelm the park. The reintroduction of wolves in 1995 brought the elk explosion to an end, either restoring a natural balance or endangering the elk's survival, depending on whom you ask. One of the best places to see the elk that remain here is Hayden Valley. It's also the best place to see an animal that is an icon of both the park and the American West. American bison, or buffalo. More than 4,000 of these massive herbivores roam free here. Favorite times to see them are in May, when the calves are born, and August, when Hayden Valley hosts the largest free-roaming bison rut, or buffalo orgy, in North America. Today's herds are descended from the park's original mountain bison and from 21 plains bison brought here in 1902. The goal was to provide vital breeding stock for a once vast bison population that had been reduced to just 25 animals. The herd's revival is a Yellowstone success story, while the story of the slaughter that brought the bison to the edge of extinction here and across North America is a part of Western lore, thanks in large part to a self-promoting sharpshooter who called Wyoming home. In southern Wyoming, in what seems to be the middle of nowhere, a mysterious form looms upon the horizon. A strange granite pyramid thrusting itself 60 feet into the sky. Architect Henry Hobson designed and built this lonely monument in 1882. Superstar sculptor Augustus St. Gaudens created its memorial plaques that few people ever see, all to honor the role played by Massachusetts brothers Oakes and Oliver Ames in one of 19th century America's greatest achievements, the building of the first transcontinental railroad. Congress authorized the Central Pacific and Union Pacific Railroad companies to start building the cross-country line in 1862. For 7 years, teams from the rival firms raced towards each other. Railroad tycoon Oliver Ames and his congressman brother Oakes played a key role in the Union Pacific side of the race. After their deaths, the company built them this memorial here in Wyoming at what was once the line's highest point. But the Union Pacific did more than build railroads and memorials in Wyoming. It transformed this remote state by bringing the world to its door. Thanks to this imposing new train station here in the city of Cheyenne, which was founded by the railway itself. In 1867, the Union Pacific Railway Company was searching for a place to establish a new railroad hub. They chose the site of a U.S. Army camp at the crossing of Crow Creek and named it Cheyenne after one of the region's Native American tribes. Today, with 60,000 residents, it's the most populated city in the entire state and home to the Wyoming State Capitol, the tallest building in town, which was built starting in 1886. That same year, the Union Pacific began work on an impressive railroad depot for the new capital. It's one of many designed by architect Henry Van Brunt, but one of just 2 still standing. Van Brunt designed it in a solid Romanesque style and gave it an imposing clock tower to symbolize Union Pacific's importance to the future state. The depot cemented Cheyenne's status as an important crossroads for freight trains full of sheep, cattle, agricultural products, and minerals. And for passenger trains full of people eager to explore the newly opened West. Today, freight trains continue to stop here, but passenger service ended in 1983. Out back, a once massive roundhouse built in 1931 to house and repair trains has been reduced from 48 stalls to 7. But the giant rotating track, built to funnel trains in and out of the fan-like storage yard, still spins, delivering the downsized roundhouse's new tenants, antique rail cars and locomotives from the Union Pacific's golden age. A time that transformed Wyoming and turned a young man named William Cody into one of the world's first Western stars. In 1867, a call went out for riflemen to hunt buffalo for meat to feed the customers and crews the railroads were bringing into the West. Bill Cody, a 21-year-old frontier scout, Pony Express rider, prospector, and Union soldier in the Civil War, was one of the many who answered the call. Over the next 18 months, the sharpshooting Cody killed over 4,200 buffalo for the railroad. One of the largest shares in a legendary slaughter that almost brought the buffalo to an end. but started William Cody on a surprising journey to worldwide fame as Buffalo Bill. A dime novelist turned Buffalo Bill into the hero of a series of highly fictionalized stories and plays based on his exploits. He spent the rest of his life playing Buffalo Bill in plays and Wild West shows, but it wasn't all make-believe. As an experienced frontier scout, Cody knew the West as well as any man and was determined to claim his share of the wealth it offered, even in corners of Wyoming where others saw nothing but dry and dusty plains. Places where the Rockies hold back the rain, deserts spread across the state from south to east, and some of America's most surreal landscapes unfold. Landscapes like the Kilpecker Sand Dunes, where these sinuous ridges wind through the heart of North America's largest active dune ecosystem. Over 100 miles long and up to 150 feet high, the dunes drift across the bottom of a vanished prehistoric lake, seeming like a landscape imported from the Sahara or the moon. Strange, yet peaceful, they seem ready-made for a desert retreat or a remake of Lawrence of Arabia. But things haven't always been so quiet here. This part of Wyoming, like most of the state, has a violent, volcanic past. A past that has almost been erased by the dunes, except here, where Boar's Tusk erupts from the sand. This 400-foot spire began forming less than 3 million years ago, when a volcano left this core of hardened lava behind. As erosion stripped away much of the volcano's sides, its tusk-like form was exposed, revealing a natural monument to Wyoming's volcanic past that looms over the desert and offered shelter to some of the region's first human inhabitants. Boar's Tusk came to be sacred to those first people. It still is to their descendants today. But then, as now, any Native American on a vision quest might decide to pass Boar's Tusk by, choosing to head north instead, to a spot that may be the most sacred in the state. Another pillar of ancient lava known as Devil's Tower. Millions of moviegoers know this strange mountain as the alien landing site in Steven Spielberg's 1977 blockbuster, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. But this mysterious 1,000-foot, 50-million-year-old column of lava was central to life here long before the white man entered the picture. Over 20 Native American tribes still practice spiritual rites here to this day. Their ancestors told of how its distinctive vertical clefts had been carved by a giant bear's massive claws. They called it Mateo Tipi, or Grizzly Bear Lodge. A confused U.S. geologist mistranslated the name as Devil's Tower in the 1870s. Local Indians called it an insult to a sacred place, but the name stuck. In the late 1800s, preservationists began asking Congress to make it a national park like Yellowstone. When Congress dragged its feet, President Theodore Roosevelt stepped in and declared that Devil's Tower would become the nation's first national monument instead. For thousands of years, the ancestors of today's Native Americans cooked their food and built their homes with wood harvested in Wyoming's forests. They hunted antelope, elk, buffalo, and other wildlife on its plains, and fished its rivers, traveling on foot wherever they went. But the arrival of Europeans transformed this ancient way of life, starting with the horses the Europeans brought with them. Modern horses originally evolved in America 4 million years ago, then spread to Asia and Europe over a long-gone land bridge over the Bering Strait. Once Europeans brought them back, strays and stolen steeds soon made their way into native hands. Horses became part of their way of life and of the ritualized warfare they used to defend their homelands from rival tribes. The Shoshone claimed most of western Wyoming, including many of the lakes, mountains, and canyons the state is most famous for. The east, with its plains, was home to the Cheyenne. The north, from the Bighorn Mountains to the east, belonged to the Crow, while the Ute and Arapaho lived side by side in the south. These homelands were central to their culture, religious life, and identity. But the European Americans who began arriving here in the 1800s seemed to think the land was theirs for the taking. As the trickle of settlers became a flood, the tribes began a bloody campaign to defend their ancient homelands and keep the newcomers out. So the U.S. government sent in the cavalry to protect the settlers from attack. In 1849, the Army established Fort Laramie on the site of an old trading post to serve as its base. It built this headquarters and barracks that same year. Carousing and wild parties soon earned it the nickname Old Bedlam, after London's Bedlam Insane Asylum. From here, the often hungover soldiers rode out to wage some of the most decisive battles of the Indian Wars. The wounded rode back to get stitched up in this base hospital, while many never made it back at all. Finally, the battered army was forced to give up. The federal government, desperate to end the most successful war against the United States ever fought by an Indian nation, sued for peace. In 1868, the great Sioux chief, Red Cloud, came to Fort Laramie to sign a peace treaty and end the wars. In return, the Sioux and other tribes were promised rights to their homeland for as long as the grass shall grow and the buffalo shall roam. But the white men broke their word as soon as gold was found in South Dakota's Black Hills. The Indians were forced off the land they had been promised and onto reservations, a betrayal that would go down in history as one of America's darkest moments. But it wasn't the last time Wyoming played host to man's inhumanity to man. In early October 1998, a mountain biker spotted something along this road near Laramie he couldn't quite make out. He took a closer look and discovered a young man who had been beaten, tied to a fence, and left to die in the freezing cold. The world soon learned that the young man's name was Matthew Shepard, and that the two other young men had apparently done this to him because he was gay. After Shepard died a few days later, his case became a rallying cry for gay rights. In October 2009, Congress responded by passing a new Hate Crimes Prevention Act bearing Matthew's name. By then, his killers had already been sentenced to life behind bars. For their protection, their exact location is kept under lock and key. If they'd committed their crime in the 1800s, U.S. Marshals might have brought them here to Laramie's Wyoming Territorial Prison. It was the Marshals' job to round up the bad guys and bring them to justice. Between 1872 and 1903, evildoers of all classes and kinds paid for their crimes behind these bars. 1,063 in all, including Butch Cassidy, but not the Sundance Kid, who Cassidy met soon after his release. 50 miles to the east, this very different tower stands guard over those elected to make, not break, the laws of the state, here at the Wyoming State Capitol building in Cheyenne. The cornerstone for the Capitol was laid with great fanfare in 1887. 30 years later, work on the 146-foot dome and massive wings finally came to an end. But Wyoming's greatest legislative moment may have come in 1870, long before construction of the Capitol began, when the territorial government gave American women the right to vote for the very first time. The U.S. Congress threatened to derail Wyoming's statehood unless the right was revoked. But Wyoming refused to back down. In 1890, it entered the Union as the first state to allow women to cast their own ballots, earning fame as the equality state, and proving that folks in Wyoming aren't afraid to stand up for opportunity, freedom, and justice when it counts. Perhaps because they know that their state's awe-inspiring scenery is there to be shared by all. From the great weathered spires of lava that soar into the sky, over ribbons of sand that seem to stretch on for eternity, from steaming valleys that tell of the terrifying forces that lie below, to the wild creatures that come here to its grasslands, to roam, and the cowboys that ride the range to drive their herds home. This is the spirit of the land called Wyoming.